Hi, I'm Chiara, and welcome to Spies of Our History. Spies are usually portrayed as high-profile people with advanced equipment and amazing fighting skills. In real life, however, they are in many ways the opposite of that. The lower the profile is, the better they are at avoiding attention, which is exactly what they want. During the Cold War, a historical period that lasted roughly from 1945, at the end of World War II, to 1991, when the USSR was dissolved, espionage played a very important and crucial role. This war was characterized by a mutual fear between the US and the USSR, the two nuclear superpowers, because these spies emerged to fulfill the task of gathering intelligence on as many steps of the enemy as possible. Some of the most famous espionage cases and events were the U-2 military drone, the Rosenbergs, among others. The main objective of espionage was to gather information and intelligence on the enemy, their military and technical capabilities, their actions and intentions. Maybe you think that they were typical spies from movies, always dressed in black and hiding. But the reality is that their appearances were those of a common citizen. Now let's move on to the couch of knowledge.
Now let's move on to the first source. Communists in the United States during the Cold War were seen as terrorists or extremists who were ready to go against the nation's own political views and infiltrate their society.
But Isa, how did Americans really know how to identify a communist?
Look at this propaganda. It's stark-striking to see how communists were identified. Here's the perfect stereotype of a communist seen through American eyes.
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it. If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in a communist publication, he may be a communist. If a person supports organizations which reflect communist teachings, or organizations labeled communist by the Department of Justice, she may be a communist. If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist. If a person does all these things over a period of time, he must be a communist.
Back to espionage now. This method became a very important motive in the Cold War, since both sides used this trick to get information from the opponent. This was a very important element in history and impacted the nations in such a way that since spies could even betray their own nation due to personal experience and bribing from the opposite band.
Whoa! The espionage that took place throughout the Cold War is deeply connected to the 5 keys. For instance, in terms of ideology, rising national pride and the struggle of communism versus capitalism were the main concepts that influenced the rise and spread of espionage from both sides of the conflict. As of natural resources, both countries had a lot, including the military equipment and nuclear weapons ready to be deployed at a very short notice. Lastly, the will of individual regards people such as John F. Kennedy, the US President, Nikita Khrushchev, Soviet Union leader, Fidel Castro, Cuba's president, and the allegiance and personal experiences of the spies themselves. Speaking of individuals, I guess you can't guess this.
I bet I can. If I do it, I can cake slap you.
Okay, here it is.
We know that Soviet attaches regularly collect this information. Our thousands of books and scientific journals, our magazines, newspapers, and official publications, our radio and television, all openly describe to all the world every aspect of our society. This is how it should be. We are proud of our freedom. Soviet distrust, however, does still remain. To allay these misgivings, I offered 5 years ago to open our skies to Soviet reconnaissance aircraft on a reciprocal basis. The Soviets refused. That offer is still open. At an appropriate time, America will submit such a program to the United Nations, together with the recommendation that the United Nations itself conduct the reconnaissance. John F. Kennedy during the U-2 incident?
No, it was Dwight Eisenhower on May 25th, 1960. Looks like you owe me a cake slap.
Oh, darn it!
Eisenhower here was talking about America, who was trying to cooperate with the Soviet Union. The president, although working together with the USSR, would not mean allying with them, because duh. They were proud of their freedom and would not let it be contaminated by communism.
Going back to the United States' fear of spies, check out this poster encouraging Americans to tell authorities about any suspicions or information they might have on a communist.
Warning from the FBI. The war against spies and saboteurs demands the aid of every American. When you see evidence of sabotage, notify the Federal Bureau of Investigation at once. When you suspect the presence of enemy agents, tell it to the FBI. Beware of those who spread enemy propaganda. Don't repeat vicious rumors.
Can you imagine walking around these streets and seeing these posters all over the place?
That would be crazy. I'd feel almost as if I was being brainwashed. The thing is, this was a real strategy used by the FBI during the Cold War. But despite their attempts, there were still some agents that betrayed the USA. Isa, don't you think it was weird how spies could disguise themselves without being caught?
Yes, totally. I mean, look at Alger Hiss in his case. He was born in Maryland and slowly began reaching his way up the government until he became Secretary of State. Wow. He was currently the president of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, but that's not important right now.
Wow, that must have let him have much more information and could give it all the way to the Soviets. But how did he get caught then?
Well, there was this other spy named Whittaker Chambers who was working in the House of Representatives and just recently announced to the public that he had been passing on classified information to the Soviet Union. His announcement also revealed that there were communists in the government, which revealed Alger Hiss. Hiss told the committee that the accusation was a complete fabrication and denied the whole incident completely. But when he was showed images of Chambers, the other spy that accused him, Alger Hiss said that he knew him by the name of George Crosby.
That's right. This trial slowly began closing on Hiss as more and more evidence appeared. For example, the 5 microfilms found inside a pumpkin, and the typewriter used to send letters about American ambassadors to the Soviets.
According to the Encyclopedia.com, Hiss was convicted of 2 types of perjury. The first one for denying that he had turned state documents over to Chambers, and the second for saying that he had not seen Chambers in the 1st of January in 1937. For the jury found that he had been delivering reports for Chambers in February and March 1938. After only completing 3 of his 5 years in prison, the case continued after the incident was handled. I mean, can you believe it? Many still believe that he was a lying communist agent, while others thought that he was a victim of the Red Scare, which was a hysterical threat posed by communists that made each federal employee be analyzed to see if they were loyal enough to the government.
But Isa, how did this specific spy case influence the United States political standpoint?
Well, I mean, first off, the trial helped Richard Nixon launch his political party on behalf of the case, meaning that he won elections because of his pursuit on Alger Hiss. It practically helped him reach presidency. Secondly, by the time Hiss was convicted, President Truman responded to the Soviets with the Marshall Plan, which meant the US gave Western Europe $13 billion to help boost up their economies after World War II, and the creation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Guys, who passed me this note? Where did it come from?
Let me see. I am ready to meet at B on October 1st. I cannot read North 13th to 19th of September. If you will meet at B on October 1st, please sign on North of September 20th to confirm. Wait, it's missing a piece.
Oh, I know, that's a note written by Aldrich Ames. He was a former spy that worked in the CIA as the case officer. Wow, was he a traitor?
Oh, yes.
He betrayed the CIA for 12 years while passing classified information to the KGB, the USSR's Foreign Intelligence Service, which they paid him $50,000 for every delivery.
So much. Wow. And why did the CIA take so much time to find out he was a spy?
Well, the CIA and FBI quickly learned that the Russian officials that were recruited by them were being arrested and executed. So they resulted in a 10-month investigation of Aldrich, in which they found revealed documents and other information linking Ames to the KGB.
No comment.
I know, they even found out he was taking a trip to Bogota, Colombia.
Wait, were you there?
No, honey, no. In which he planned on meeting the Russians. Aldrich Ames planned on meeting the Russians there. The FBI arrested him shortly and began questioning him. At this point, Ames was compromising CIA and FBI human sources, passing it along to the Soviets.
The FBI states, in accordance to his plea agreement with the government, he forfeited his assets to the United States, and $547,000 was turned over to the Justice Department's Victims Assistance Fund. He's still serving his sentence to this day in the Allenwood U.S. Penitentiary.
Thank God he's been locked away.
I know! I'm starting to see these connections within these Spies case trials. It's amazing how one person can jeopardize the whole country without them even knowing it. Wait, I just received a WhatsApp from the Soviets.
Huh?
It was just about time they shared their opinion about the U-2 incident.
Let's see what it says.
How is it possible to reconcile this with declarations on part of the leading figures of the United States of America? That the government of the United States of America, like the Soviet government, also strives for improvement of relations between the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and the United States, for relaxation of international tension and in strengthening of trust between states. Military intelligence activities of one nation by intrusion in the area of another country can hardly be called a method for improving relations and strengthening trust. It is impossible to exclude the thought that, apparently the two governments view differently the necessity for improving relations with our countries and for the creation of a favorable ground for the success of the forthcoming summit meeting.
According to the Soviets, they felt as betrayed as the United States and backfired, because who wouldn't do so in those circumstances?
So a brief summary would be that the aircraft was shut down by Soviet rocket troops in Sverdlovsk because it was trespassing. After researching, it was discovered that the aircraft was from the US and was sent through Pakistan.
But its real purpose was to detect the Soviet Union's radar network through aerial photography. The U-2 incident happened May 1st, 1960 at 5:36 p.m. There is proof of this incident through a tape recording the signals of Soviet Union's radar stations.
To come to an end, what were the causes and consequences of espionage in the Cold War with specific reference to trial cases?
There were various causes and consequences of espionage in the Cold War. First of all, some of the main causes were the wanting to find information about other nations, the gaining of power, and that they had the military equipment necessary for spies. This being an interesting and attractive topic, there were sacrifices and tragic consequences. For example, betrayal of countries, electric chairs, people got hanged or shot, and counter-espionage to end these incidents. There were some important trial cases that left a mark in the history of espionage, such as the ones mentioned before. However, besides from the ones already mentioned, there are other ones that are also very important.
For example, the Rosenberg's trial. Ethel and Julius Rosenberg were the first US citizens in being accused and executed due to espionage. Julius was accused of passing information about the atomic bomb to the Soviet Union. Wow, I know. While Ethel's brother led Julius in committing this unlawful act. When they were caught, David Gringlas, Ethel's brother, testified against the Rosenbergs, which led to this executing them in an electric chair in Sing Sing prison.
That must have been awful.
It was, however. Spies were always risking their lives to guarantee the country its freedom.
Back to the desk of conclusions.
In the last 50 years, espionage activity has advanced thanks to technology, especially in the areas of radio signal interception and high-altitude photography. The internet also created opportunities for spies to hack and interfere into other governments. Cryptography became computerized and effective to hide information through codes. Counter-espionage is also recognized as the defensive side of intelligence activity by preventing another nation from gaining such information from others. Under international law, intelligence activities are not illegal, although each country has their own laws that correspond to it.
We have now gone over espionage and how it played a big role during the Cold War between the US and the USSR. But how does something that seems so distant affect us in our daily lives? Well, it turns out that up until this day, espionage is still a major strategy and concern used and feared by many countries in the world. In some cases, like the USA, it is even popularly believed that the government spies on its own population to avoid betrayal and dissolve any internal terrorism that might be being planned on the US soil. So now that you know about spies and their ways, be aware that someone may be watching you and you may not even know it. Thanks for watching
And subscribe!